Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be doing a review of The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey, best known as the writers of The Expanse, Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, and their pseudonym or pen name, James S.A. Corey. Now, this is a book that I think a lot of people, myself included, have really been looking forward to. Like a lot of folks, I am a fan of The Expanse. You can see some of them on the shelf there behind me, though it's honestly been a bit of an albatross series for me because I started reading it years and years ago and never actually finished. So this was an excuse, honestly, for me to just dive back into their writing to kind of push me to go back and finish that series. So while I will try to do my best, because I think a question a lot of people have, is it as good as The Expanse? Is it even better? I've only read like the first 4 books, so I will try and use that as a benchmark of comparison as we talk about this a little bit. Now, this book is very much still a science fiction epic, but I think brought down more to a slightly smaller scale. If you're familiar with The Expanse, it is, I think, basically has become the quintessential space opera. And this book has, I think, a lot of hallmarks of their writing, but drawn down to a much more human scale and is very much more a human story. Now, what's interesting about this book for me is that I've been reading a lot of, I don't want to call them like popcorn flick books recently, but this is a book that makes you think, holy crap. And this is a book that makes you to try. Their prose especially is so much more robust than a lot of the books that I've been reading recently. And I say this having read Three Body and Children of Time this year, both books that I will definitely be referencing over the course of this review. But it definitely was not a book that, I got through it in, a decent amount of time considering when it came out. And I actually got this sort of day of, so I didn't get an ARC review or anything on this. But this review will cover both a spoiler-free look at this, sort of the first chunk of the book, talk about my first initial impressions, and then I want to talk about the back half of this book, because honestly, every sort of discussion or post or anything I've seen about this so far, because it's so new, has been spoiler-free. But I want to talk about it. So for all of us who are coming in here and hopefully with some of the same ideas, if you haven't read it yet, that's great. First part of this review will be spoiler-free, but I do want to get into less plot-specific stuff and more like fan theories and discussions on the back end. So I just want to start this off. So let's talk about the book. It starts on a planet called Anjin, which is an alien world with some unalien people, or I guess they're aliens there, with humans on this alien planet. And Anjin took a very different sort of evolutionary path from Earth and has its own sort of unique structure to the way things are created, not using DNA as an example. And at some point in the planet's history, roughly 3,000 years ago, humans appeared on this planet. They appeared randomly on an island, and then at some point shortly after, it got like nuked, maybe? And humans lost all of their history. They have no idea how they ended up on this planet. So you have a human civilization, which still is very much human. They have universities and schools, and they eat, pork skewers, and, very much they have the internet and all that kind of stuff, but just in a very alien environment. Which was, I think, a really interesting concept to start with, and I'll talk about my thoughts more of that at the end. And this book is it's essentially a first contact story. It really, it follows this group of scientists. This is a multi-POV, third-person past tense book. It's the kind of things that matter to me, so there you are. It is a multi-POV story that does have I would say, sort of more main POV than the others. A character named David. No, you didn't hear that wrong. Not David, David. Which I think is sort of like a callback to the fact that, again, like humanity is pseudo lost its past and everything is just slightly different. Though I'll be honest, reading the name David for 300 or 440 whatever pages was kind of annoying, I won't lie. And it really just follows this group of scientists sort of at their peak. They're the most renowned scientists on the planet under the lead of this genius Tanner Freeze, who have successfully managed to merge the human evolutionary branch with the evolutionary branch of Anjin, and have been able to combine these two totally disparate alien species together to create like new life, essentially, or to find new interesting ways to nurture and grow that, which is obviously a massive achievement. So it sort of follows the early stages of some initial politicking, and while that's going on, a different group of scientists discovers some sort of lensing that's happening in like hyperspace or something, and essentially discovering that aliens are en route to the planet. And it sort of follows, like I said, this first contact story. While all this is going on, you realize there is already an alien species, a sentient alien species, on the planet. And this is the Swarm, which is a really interesting character. It's essentially, like, it is what it is. It's a swarm of something, sort of micro robots, essentially, but they're alive. And why they're there, what their intentions are, we don't know, but they've taken over a human host. And part of discovering about that host and all these other things and sort of what their goals are is a big part of the mystery of this story, because this book has a lot of thriller mystery elements. And for a lot of folks coming in who are, again, looking for that same kind of big epic space opera elements of The Expanse, I don't really think you're going to find those here. This is, again, like I said, it's a much more introspective story, a lot more about the idea of human nature. And one of the things that stood out to me a lot about it is how human the humans feel in comparison to how alien the aliens are. And that's a big part of this as well, is sort of how we look at things versus how other people look at things. And it honestly is a really good sort of it's a very good practice in sort of, because again, the lead character, his whole thing is empathy and just sort of how we as humans express empathy and how we put ourselves in other people's shoes. Now, I'm not really going to go too much past this in terms of the plot. I do think that, again, this is one of those that the second you put one toe over a line, you really do get into spoiler territory, which I will in a bit, but that's where I'm going to stop it there. It really is. It's a first contact story with an absolute twist or an absolute spin. Now, in terms of the writing itself, like I said, if you're someone who is a fan of The Expanse and the very verbose prose and very unique prose of these two authors, then this is going to feel right at home. But it almost feels like they've taken the core of that and turned it up just even an additional notch. It's almost a little bit self-aggrandizing. And again, I think this feels a little bit contrasted because, again, I've been reading more lighter, quicker reads recently. But man, it really smacks you in the face. Like, you've got to try with this one. Not even just the sheer amount of characters, because it's not really that many. It's just, I mean, anytime I have to, and again, I would like to think I'm relatively well read at this point. If I have to stop and look up what a word means, like, that's how you know we're pushing the envelope a little bit more in terms of, this is not just your standard everyday read. And the first 100 pages of this book, candidly, are quite slow. Leading up to this moment of first contact, it's very slow. If you're used to, again, something like Leviathan Wakes, remember the cant. If you're used to that or expecting that kind of very aggressive opening, that really big start, that wow, you're instantly being driven into the action, you're not going to get this here. This book is very much a setup of the world, of the characters, of the stakes, because the stakes are very high. And again, it doesn't have that quite that same dynamism. It's very much, it's more of the philosophical nature of this. It reminds me, again, of a book like Children of Time, which really dives into the idea of what does it mean to be human. And very much, again, like Children of Time, I mean, Tchaikovsky is quoted on the back of this book, uses comparing and contrasting humans to aliens as a foil, as a way to deeper explore what it means to be human. And then again, when you combine this character like the Swarm, who is absorbing these human emotions and developing human feelings as it sort of evolves into a unique form of sentience, how those things come together and that exploration is really the crux of what this story is about. And I think it does a very good job of like what really would happen if humans encountered this specific first contact situation. So yeah, it was a good book for me right off the back. Again, I can't compare it to the entirety, how many books of The Expanse there are, like 11 of them or however many. But of the ones that I have read, it didn't quite immediately capture this for me, I'll be honest. This was probably like a 3.75 to a 4 in terms of if I was to give this a star rating. But I'm so intrigued because they drip fed you so many little mysteries, so many little things to think about as you head further into this book. So yeah, it was good. It was definitely a little slow, definitely a little bit dry, especially at the beginning. But I do, and I will be honest, I don't think that the group dynamic, because it really is about this group dynamic, it did not have the same pull to me as the Rocinante. Like, you fall in love with that crew so immediately. And I didn't quite have that same sense here. I don't think they necessarily nailed it as much. And I don't think necessarily having that super pressing threat immediately, people bond through trauma. And while they eventually did, it happened in a very different way. So yeah, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to leave that there. This will be the end of the spoiler-free section. Again, if you're a fan of James S.A. Corey's writing, if you're a fan of The Expanse, it's not in the same universe from what I gather, though it could, or at least it's not connected directly. I could imagine it being in the same universe, or wouldn't be surprised if there ends up being more connections, but you don't need to have read The Expanse to enjoy this one. So yeah, I recommend checking it out if you're a fan of these harder science fiction reads. Again, if you enjoyed things like Three Body as well, or especially Children of Time, I saw a lot of comparisons here. But yeah, be ready to go in and have to take a few seconds to be like, okay, there's this and there's this and there's this. Hint, there are a lot of alien names thrown around in this, and are you expected to remember them all? I don't know. There it is. So let's now talk about a little bit more in depth. So in the back half, we are entering spoiler territory. I'm not going to again dive into the plot quite so much, but I wanted to sort of talk about some stuff. Okay, you have been warned. You have been warned. Okay. Humans living on an alien planet and not remembering where they came from makes no sense. All right? Unless there is some like mind control, memory wipe element to this, it doesn't make any sense. Even if they literally came over and either nuked themselves out of conflict or glassed the island they were on because they were trying to use the same technology to go back to Earth or Earth adjacent, does not make any sense to me. Yeah, humans traditionally, we have a culture of verbal and oral history. We spoke our histories for thousands of years. The fact that like we still have pork skewers again, and we have all our animals, and we have trees, and we have internet and universities and like grants and folks, like you don't get all of those. You don't get to keep all of those tidbits of history and lose how you ended up on this planet in the first place. Like I don't truly believe, and I get they're trying to go for something unique. It does not compute for me at all. Again, I get there's always another secret. I get it's a mystery, it's a thriller, but man, I don't know. Also, the weird Cosmere similarities, like Paul, not everything has to do with Brandon Sanderson. Yes, but also like if you know anything about the island of Thelena, I won't give spoilers, and also the relation of Shinovar to the rest of Roshar, very similar kind of things where humans are just sort of plopped in there. So just a thought, kind of odd. I think the Swarm, I'm going to totally 180 this. Now, the Swarm was definitely one of the best parts of this book. It honestly reminded me, actually this whole book kind of reminded me, I don't know if you guys have seen on TikTok, where it's like an AI voice reading like where humans are actually the scary alien stories, and there's like Minecraft speedrunning on the bottom. This honestly feels like if the authors took that and were like, but what if we did it for real? What if we took one of these concepts and made it interesting? Because the way the Swarm is evolving with humanity is going to be absolutely, it kind of feels like that. The idea of, yes, the Swarm they've been sending out these probes all over the universe and or all over the galaxy. I think it's universe, actually. I think this is I think this is intergalactic. And they found a species so unique that it caused this really interesting, humans are so special that it created this like unexpected evolutionary path of the Swarm. That feels like very much one of those like stories you'd read on Reddit or something. And I thought that was cool. Because, they're kind of, for me, they're a little bit of a guilty pleasure, even though I think some of them are written with AI, which is obviously not good. And yeah, I think following that journey and that progression will be interesting. I think the Carracks as an oppositionary force, I don't know how I feel about them, honestly, because again, they do a lot of time describing the physicality of these big shrimpies, but their physicality isn't why they're threatening. Not really. Like, they are susceptible to traditional weaponry. They have armor that still gets punched through by weapons. What was that first and I guess this is probably something that's going to be explored, but as they started subjugating these first animal species, what did that look like? Like, they must have had some sort of bespoke technological advantage. Like, the whole thing they're trying to tell us is just really, it was the mindset. The mindset set them apart. But at some point, mindset isn't enough. Like, you have to, like, was it just happened to be the order that they started, subjugating or enslaving these other species? Was that kind of it? But they had, like, someone had to be first. So yeah, I don't know. That one was, again, basically they practice this like hyper form of eugenics, like where like the second you show any form of weakness, the second you lose even once, no, you're not able to go and pass on your DNA, and you're not even capable. So that was, again, a totally contrarian mindset to humanity, where the idea that we were sort of in antithesis to evolution, the collective group, the strong help prop up the weak, and that we collectively raise ourselves up, a total antithesis. And clearly we're not even alone in this, because they even reference other species that were like, peace is the ultimate goal, and they're like, peace is unachievable, haha, like almost a little comedically evil, but again, just presented so clinically that it almost couldn't be. And I think that was really where this shined was, and I think these authors did a fantastic job of this, was just, again, like Tchaikovsky, making these feel absolutely not human. And the discovery of that process, that journey, was, I think, again, what was the key element of this book. Though one thing that was really stood out to me going to the end was that it kind of felt like the test was, will you turn in other members of your race? Will you basically help domesticate yourselves as a species? Like that's what kind of what it felt like they were looking for. But then at the same time, the act of doing that saved the librarian's life that caused him to be like ritualistically sacrificed. Was that always the goal? Like, I don't know. I still don't 100% feel like we necessarily, even though we, sure, they combined the two evolutionary streams, but was that actually what they were being tested on? The whole point was that it sort of felt like, no, that's not what they were being tested on. I think really the test was, will you turn in members of your own race in order to protect the whole, in order to show that you're willing to serve? Again, will you essentially help domesticate yourselves? Because they're not looking at this in the short gain of this group of humans. They're looking at the potential of the species. They're looking at this in 1,000. How do we, like we're domesticating foxes in Russia right now. That's how they look at us. But at the same time, they punished the librarian who was in charge. I don't know. Did I miss something in there? I'm curious to hear your thoughts for those who've read it. Do you feel like I'm on track with that? Did you interpret the test slightly differently? Also, the whole reveal with Jellet, like, was that like supposed to be like a surprise? I mean, I kind of immediately guessed it the second he came into the room and was like going along with the plan like way too well. Yeah, that one I think was a bit of a miss in terms of how like the mysteries revealed themselves. I think in general, like how the thriller elements of the plot aligned was great. But that one was kind of a miss. I do truly think too, like, them as a crew, as a group living in this, this space, this sort of liminal weird zoo, was one of the strongest points of the book. The thing that stood out to me the most, though, in terms of sort of set dressing and the human interactions of the crew and the group, was that at no point did anybody try and worship the Carricks as gods, which I kind of felt like, given our history of humanity, would have happened. Like when they're in that tiny room for 6 weeks and they're just living in their own filth and everybody's going crazy, you'd think that like a cult or something would have formed to be like, yes, we worship these bug aliens. Let's go, shrimps for life. Because realistically, I mean, looking at how humans exist now and our insistence on deifying things that don't deserve it, that kind of felt like it kind of should have happened. I think like the only reasonable explanation that it didn't is that they took like the best of humanity, quote unquote, like the most intelligent people. So maybe that's why. It also didn't really seem like there were any children in the group, to sort of add that extra dynamic in, which I think was smart, honestly. But yeah, that's kind of one thing that jumped out at me in terms of the overall interactions. And I think, again, I just didn't feel the same connection with the group, with the Rosenauts. Like all like the sexual tension, the will they, won't they, the whole, like all of that is just a screen for showing the swarm falling in love, I thought was fine, but I didn't need all the dumb interpersonal dynamics. I guess it just goes to show that even if you throw humans in the worst environment, like the most trauma, absolute incredible stress responses, we just revert back to being our most base human beings. I guess that was kind of the point, but it was just sort of like, all right, I guess that's how it's going to go. And I do feel like, honestly, a bit of the action, like with the whole like night trickers and everything, was just a little bit contrived. Because like, why didn't you just go and wipe them? Like at that point, if you know that it's truly like they're going to throw bombs and use us versus them, go as an entire group and just wipe them out. Like that was the part of me that felt the least human. Because I feel like normally in a group of people like that would have been the response. You go and you deal with the problem, like do what humanity has always done and just freaking just get rid of this group that's going to, like, it's us versus them. Yeah, kind of surprised that didn't end up being the case there. I mean, especially once I guess in the end they ended up succeeding and they won, quote unquote, and it ended up happening anyway. But I'm just kind of surprised. I think it would have been an opportunity to just really show like our base human nature and just how terrifying we can be. But again, I guess when you have a group of scientists in this case who are trying to sort of rise above those base instincts, that's sort of the war, that internal conflict that's also happening there. And I think David is sort of being a focal point for that was interesting because obviously the swarm falling in love with him was a big element of it. And of course, now that the swarm is Ingel, it almost kind of feels like, is it like a cross sleeve, like altered carbon kind of situation here? But I think the ultimate evolution of this will be that the swarm takes over or merges with David. And that, I think, is what spawns what we see in the first page of the book. And having these journal entries from the overseer, from the librarian this whole time, I think was a really smart call. Because it basically has you looking at David through like, when, Poke it, do something. Do something. When are you going to do something special? When are you going to show how special you are? When the reality is, of course, this character is just highly observant and, you know, highly I'm an empath. If you're, I mean, anybody in Los Angeles, you know what I'm talking about. Just honestly, the character just felt like, I think that the point is that he's not that special. He's just a human who has a very good job of utilizing the art of human empathy and putting yourself in someone else's shoes and being able to get inside the minds of these aliens, specifically the Carricks, is how we end with the resources in the mind of the swarm is how they potentially end up undoing them. And setting that up from the outset, I think, was a really fun plot device. So yeah, again, I think the first 100 pages of this book, if you're coming and expecting action, like I don't know what I was expecting. And honestly, if you're anyone other than James S.A. Corey, I don't know that you could really get away with that. I mean, that first opening chapter, those first opening lines, so contrary to everything that everyone is telling people trying to like query, a professional, like a publisher or whatever. Like you need to start with that super strong hook, that super strong opening. They showed that if you have the right backing and the solid prose, you don't necessarily need that. You can have these true character opening starts. So yeah, I want to hear what you all thought. I think this is probably going to end up being a pretty polarizing book for people who are hardcore fans of The Expanse. I think a lot of folks will probably end up rating it a little bit lower, but like me, maybe still really excited to see where it's going to go. That's really where it ended up for me. I'm curious to hear what you all think. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.